The pink gold power move. Canada's quiet retaliation. It didn't start with a bang. There was no fiery press conference, no red-faced trade minister waving documents on live TV. No, Canada's response to Trump's economic aggression was quieter, strategic, surgical. When the 47th president, Donald J. Trump again, announced a 35% tariff threat on Canadian potash in early 2025, Ottawa didn't scream. They didn't stomp. They simply slowed the shipments. And that's when the U.S. farm belt lit up like a Christmas tree on fire. You see, Canada isn't just a nice neighbor with maple syrup and Mounties. Canada is a global kingpin of potash, a fertilizer essential for growing food. Potash isn't sexy, it doesn't get hashtags, but it's the invisible foundation of the world's breadbasket. And Canada controls over 1/3 of the world's potash reserves. More importantly, they supply 90% of the United States imported potash.
If you're done watching corrupt elites rig the system and leave you behind, subscribe now. If you want real talk, raw truth, and zero spin, this is your channel. If you're ready to fight back, hit that subscribe button and stand with us.
So when Canada started closing the tap, fertilizer prices in the U.S. exploded by 38% in just 3 weeks. Farmers in Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas didn't care about tariffs or nationalistic bluster. They just knew they couldn't afford to plant. Some canceled crops for the first time in generations. Entire planting seasons disrupted. Family farms on the brink. All because Donald Trump wanted to play tough guy with a country that quietly holds a critical lever of American agriculture. And it wasn't just potash. It was a signal. America's fertile illusion, dependent and defenseless. Let's talk about the so-called America First energy of 2025. While Trump stormed back into office on a wave of slogans and showmanship, real-world systems didn't get the memo. The United States talks a big game about self-sufficiency, but when it comes to potash, it's exposed, naked, vulnerable. The U.S. has potash reserves, sure, but producing it? That's a different story. Domestic output covers just 8% of American demand. The rest? Mostly comes riding a rail from Saskatchewan straight into U.S. farmlands. Why so little production? Blame a deadly combo of environmental red tape, sluggish permitting processes, and outdated infrastructure. American potash mines can't expand fast enough, and Washington doesn't move any faster. In contrast, Canada doesn't shout. It builds. It prepares. While Trump throws tariffs like darts at a map, Canada is strategically securing supply chains, building resilience, and weaponizing resources not with anger, but with precision. Mark Carney's game of quiet leverage. Enter Mark Carney, the former Bank of England governor turned Canadian power player. A man more comfortable in Davos than on TikTok. Carney isn't exactly a populist. But here's the twist. He doesn't have to be. Carney doesn't fight Trump with press releases. He fights with infrastructure, trade flows, and quiet influence. Under Carney's shadow strategy, Canada didn't retaliate with tariffs. It retaliated with disruption. Slowing potash shipments wasn't a tantrum. It was chess. One calculated slowdown, and the U.S. agricultural sector panicked. Fertilizer dealers scrambled. Crop insurance rates spiked. And Trump? He got exactly what he never sees coming. Consequences. Carney's message was clear. You want a trade war? Fine, but we won't fight it your way. We'll win it by quietly destabilizing your base. Canada's LNG pivot, bypassing the American bottleneck. And it didn't stop with potash. Canada, long dependent on U.S. pipelines and export routes, has finally pulled a strategic escape move in the energy sector. In 2025, Canadian LNG liquefied natural gas exports bypass the U.S. entirely, heading straight to Asia through new Pacific terminals. That's not just about gas. It's about freedom. Canada no longer needs American infrastructure to access global markets. And while Trump was busy slapping tariffs on everything that breathes, Carney's Canada was investing in long-term capacity. LNG export hubs, coastal infrastructure, and direct shipping routes. The result? U.S. energy influence is shrinking while Canada is gaining ground, quietly but permanently. And let's not forget, U.S. energy producers are now struggling with uncertainty, drilling moratoriums, and rising costs. Meanwhile, Canada's LNG shipments are bringing in stable revenue and forging new partnerships across the Pacific. That's not luck. That's strategy. Steel strength, Canada builds while the U.S. rusts. Steel might not dominate headlines, but it builds everything. Roads, bridges, cars, homes. And here again, Canada is outmaneuvering the United States. While U.S. steel plants sit idle and modernization projects get mothballed thanks to trade chaos and government inaction, Canada has quietly funneled over $1 billion into steel innovation, worker stabilization, and protective import quotas. Not tariffs, quotas. Targeted, smart, and designed to protect domestic jobs without igniting international blowback. The Liberal government, with Carney's economic fingerprints all over it, didn't cry foul when Trump reignited steel tariffs. They didn't retaliate like for like. Instead, they rebuilt. They modernized. They reinforced. And now, Canadian steel is humming. Jobs are returning. Production is up. Meanwhile, in America, plants are rusting. Union workers are angry. And made in the USA is increasingly a punchline. The MAGA disconnect. Rhetoric versus reality. Trump came into office, again, promising to protect American farmers, boost manufacturing, and dominate global trade. But here's the reality. Under his leadership, America got weaker in key economic sectors, not stronger. The Potash debacle exposed the U.S. food system's dangerous reliance on a single foreign supplier, Canada. The LNG bypass revealed how little influence Washington actually has on North American energy flows. And the steel contrast showed how hollow Trump's industrial promises really are. Executive orders? Plenty. Real investment? Barely. Trump tweets. Carney builds. And while MAGA rallies cheer for slogans about bringing jobs back, Canada is doing a hard, quiet work of actually making that happen for Canadians. Farmers betrayed, workers abandoned. You want to see the real cost of Trump's trade brinkmanship? Visit a farm in Missouri where half the fields are fallow because fertilizer was too expensive to plant. Talk to a steel worker in Pennsylvania who got a pink slip because his plant never got the promised modernization funds. Or an LNG operator in Texas watching Canadian ships sail out with contracts his company couldn't land due to unstable federal regulations. These are forgotten soldiers in Trump's economic war games. Real people paying the price for performative politics. Meanwhile, Canada is building alliances, shoring up supply chains, and investing in long-term prosperity. If there's one thing the showdown between Canada and the U.S. has revealed, it's this. Spectacle doesn't build resilience. Strategy does. Donald Trump may dominate the media cycle. He may rant rage and rally with the bombast of Vegas headliner. But economic ecosystems aren't built with applause. They're built with infrastructure, investment, and intelligent policy. And that's where Mark Carney's Canada is pulling ahead. Take Potash. The U.S. had decades to reduce its dependence. Instead, it let red tape pile up, shut down environmentally questionable mines, and ignored calls from the agricultural sector to diversify its supply. Canada, they consolidated, expanded, secured market share, and now they sit atop the Potash pyramid, cool, calm, and absolutely crucial. So when the tariff threats came down, they didn't need to scream. They just needed to turn the dial. And the U.S. farm economy cracked. Trump's MAGA doctrine had no answer, because America first doesn't mean much when your entire food system relies on Canada always. A trade war without a war room. Where was the strategy on the U.S. side? A real leader might have used the Potash flare-up as a wake-up call. Time to incentivize domestic production, streamline permitting, or at least stabilize pricing with subsidies. Instead, Trump doubled down. Another round of threats. Another batch of executive orders designed to look tough while doing absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, the damage multiplied. Food processors reported cost surges. Farmers went into debt, refinancing their planting plans. And the inflationary ripple hit consumers fast. Produced prices up, groceries tighter, and middle America once again feeling the pain of policies designed for headlines, not households. And while D.C. talked, Ottawa acted. The LNG shuffle redrawing energy maps. Remember the energy independence anthem Trump paraded around in 2016? We're going to drill, baby, drill. Fast forward to 2025, and the reality looks like this. U.S. LNG exports slowed, bogged down by legal challenges, environmental protests, and confusing federal guidelines. Canadian LNG exports soared, thanks to a streamlined federal-provincial partnership and billions in infrastructure investment. And here's the kicker. Canada is now shipping directly to Asian markets without routing through the U.S., bypassing American ports and influence entirely. This is a geopolitical earthquake, because for decades, American energy dominance was a central pillar of its global leverage. But now, Canada is eroding that dominance not with confrontation, but with competition, with options, with efficiency. And Donald Trump? He's too busy yelling about windmills and Biden-era drilling, permits to even notice the power is slipping away. Steel is a shield, Canada's domestic armor. Let's turn to steel, another industry Trump promised to save in his first term. Remember the grandstanding at steel plants? The tariffs hailed as protection for American workers? Fast forward to now, and most of those plants are idle. The industry didn't need a tariff. It needed a plan. What it got was a tweet. Meanwhile, in Canada, the approach was different. Quotas were applied not to punish allies, but to keep non-FTA steel from flooding the market. Investment poured into automation, low-carbon production, and retraining programs for workers. The goal wasn't photo op, it was durability. And it's working. Canadian steel jobs are returning. New facilities are opening. And domestic procurement policies ensure that Canadian infrastructure is built with Canadian steel. This isn't nationalist rhetoric. This is economic intelligence. It's the difference between empty patriotism and actual patriot-based policy. Trump's trade bluff is called. For years, Trump has sold the image of the hard-nosed dealmaker, the alpha negotiator, the guy who gets what he wants because everyone's too scared to say no. Well, Canada just said no, and Trump didn't have a comeback. When the Potash slowdown hit, there was no retaliatory avalanche of new U.S. tariffs, because even Trump's advisors knew that pushing back would make food inflation even worse. American farmers were already protesting. Congressional Republicans from AG-heavy states were already panicking. So what did Trump do? He blamed everyone except himself. He accused Canada of playing dirty, after threatening them first. He called fertilizer inflation Biden's legacy, after he ignited it. And he promised new America First solutions, with no plan whatsoever. Meanwhile, Canada kept turning the screws. Quietly, legally, effectively. Mark Carney, the globalist who outsmarted MAGA. It must sting. For a movement that hates elites, Donald Trump just got outplayed by the ultimate technocrat, Mark Carney. The former central banker, British accent, Harvard degree and all, just pulled off one of the most elegant power plays in North American trade history. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need rallies. He just needed Trump to do what Trump always does. Overreach, overpromise, and underdeliver. And while MAGA media screamed about betrayal and sabotage, Carney's policies calmly shifted the economic center of gravity northward. It's a quiet revolution, a reshuffling of leverage, and it's already too late to stop. America's vanishing leverage. This is bigger than potash, bigger than LNG, bigger than steel. This is about leverage. And under Trump, America is bleeding it. Supply chains, fractured by chaotic tariffs and abandoned trade deals. Infrastructure, promised, never delivered. Alliances, undermined for ego trips and Twitter clout. Meanwhile, Canada, once treated as a junior partner, is slowly becoming the adult in the room by investing in long-term industrial resilience, diversifying markets, and making friends where America made enemies. Canada is creating options for itself. And when your neighbor has options and you don't, that's when the power dynamic flips. Farmers and manufacturers left in the cold. Let's get back to the human cost. A 38% spike in fertilizer prices doesn't just hurt big AG corporations. It destroys small farms. It upends rural economies. It means fewer acres planted, lower yields, and less income for people who are already barely hanging on. And when U.S. steel plants close, it doesn't just dent GDP. It devastates whole communities. Towns built around foundries, machinists, truck drivers, suppliers. Gone, because the federal government won't commit to the hard work of industrial policy. Meanwhile, Canada is quietly proving that industrial policy can work, that government can partner with business, invest in the future, and build a foundation that actually protects its citizens from global chaos. And Trump? He offers speeches, hats, rage, but not results. The great reversal. Who needs who now? For decades, the U.S. acted like Canada couldn't afford to walk away, that the U.S. market was a market, that if Washington raised its voice, Ottawa would fall in line. Not anymore. Now, Canada has export pathways to Asia, a steel sector designed for domestic needs, and agricultural exports that are no longer guaranteed to land in Chicago first. The trade relationship is no longer dependency. It's a choice. And choices come with conditions. So when Trump threatens tariffs, he's no longer holding a gun. He's holding a boomerang. Because the minute he acts, Canada reacts, and the U.S. economy suffers more than theirs. This isn't some temporary trade tiff. This is an NAFTA 2.0 drama, or an isolated tariff dispute. What we're witnessing in 2025 is a continental shift in leverage, an economic and political tectonic plate movement, where Canada, for the first time in modern memory, holds the upper hand. The United States used to think of Canada as a quiet little cousin, polite, cooperative, dependent on American markets. And to be fair, for decades, that characterization held water. Canada was dependent. But here's the difference now. While America got drunk on slogans, Canada got serious about sovereignty. They didn't shout it from Parliament Hill. They planned. They mapped out how to reduce exposure to U.S. chaos, how to monetize critical resources, how to modernize the supply chain from the mine to the port, from the forge to the farm. Now, Trump's erratic decisions don't just ripple through the U.S., they backfire. And Canada? They're not just surviving, they're thriving, quietly, strategically, and unapologetically. America's own goals, policy that undermines itself. You'd think a president obsessed with winning would know how not to score on his own net. But in Trump's America, every trade tantrum becomes a self-inflicted wound. Threaten Canadian potash? Farmers get crushed, not Canada. Squeeze LNG permits? Canada builds terminals and leave you behind. Tariff Canadian steel? They modernize. Your factory stays shuttered. At some point, even Trump's most diehard supporters have to ask, what are we getting from this? The man ran as a deal maker, but the deals? They're not there. Just a trail of wreckage. Industries further behind, allies alienated, and American workers more vulnerable than ever. It's not even ideological anymore. It's incompetence. Plain and simple. Because even if you want to be protectionist, you need a plan. You need alternatives. You don't just swing a hammer and hope the economy magically restructures itself. But Trump has never understood systems. He understands sound bites. And that's why Canada is walking away with the long game, while the U.S. keeps losing short-term skirmishes it started in the first place. A new trade order, without Washington calling the shots. Look closely, and you'll see something deeper happening beneath all the surface noise. A new trade order is emerging in North America, and the U.S. isn't at the center of it anymore. Canada is forging deeper ties with Europe, Asia, and even Latin American markets. And it's doing so through multi-decade infrastructure commitments, rail, shipping lanes, digital corridors, port investments. They're building a lattice of reliable, rules-based commerce. And the U.S.? It's burning bridges. Under Trump's second term, Washington has pulled out of more multilateral forums, insulted more allies, and shredded more trade certainty than any administration in memory. The result? Other countries, including Canada, aren't waiting around anymore. They're adapting. They're innovating. They're turning their backs, not because they hate America, but because they can't count on it. And that's the deepest failure of all. Because power isn't just about tanks and tariffs. It's about reliability. When America becomes unreliable, it becomes irrelevant. The potash crisis is a mirror. Potash might seem like a niche commodity, but it's a mirror, a perfect reflection of the larger dysfunction infecting U.S. economic policy. Think about it. A mineral almost no one talks about outside the agricultural world suddenly becomes a linchpin of food inflation, crop shortages, and rural instability. Why? Because no one planned for this. Because Trump launched a tariff missile without checking where the fallout would land. Because the entire system was vulnerable, and no one in power cared enough to shore it up. And on the other side, Canada didn't need to posture. They just needed to do less, ship less, and let market forces do their work. This is what asymmetrical economic warfare looks like in the 21st century. No tanks, no embargoes, just quiet decisions that change the game while your opponent is still figuring out the rules. Carney's Canada, cold, calculated, and effective. If Trump is fire and fury, Mark Carney is frost and calculus. He doesn't scream about winning. He calculates how to win. And the Potash disruption? That was a masterclass in quiet coercion. Canada didn't violate any rules. They didn't break any trade agreements. They just used timing, slowed shipments ever so slightly, claimed infrastructure delays, standard seasonal maintenance. Nothing overt, nothing sanctionable. But the result was nuclear. A 38% spike in fertilizer prices. Fields left barren. Farmers facing ruin. And Trump? He couldn't retaliate. He was boxed in. Any further escalation would have driven food inflation even higher and alienated the very rural base he claims to champion. Mark Carney, the globalist, just exposed Trump's biggest weakness. He has no long game. None. Just firestorms. And you can't beat a strategist with a slogan. The false patriotism of economic isolation. Trump wraps every economic failure in a flag. When steel tariffs failed, he blamed foreign cheaters. When farmers protested over fertilizer prices, he blamed past administrations. When energy exports stalled, he blamed environmentalists. But here's the truth. Real patriotism means building capacity, not just blaming others. It means ensuring your country can feed itself, fuel itself, and manufacture what it needs without relying on a chaotic web of political guesswork. Canada is doing exactly that, building domestic resilience, investing in its own people, planning for volatility rather than pretending it doesn't exist. Trump's America, meanwhile, pretends. It pretends every problem is a conspiracy. Every ally is an enemy. Every setback is fake news. But pretending doesn't grow food. It doesn't produce steel. It doesn't replace potash. It just delays a collapse. The risk of irreversible decline. Canada isn't trying to destroy its relationship with the U.S. It's just not willing to be dependent anymore. And that should terrify anyone who understands North American economic dynamics. Because once Canada decouples, once it has the infrastructure, trade routes, and market diversification to survive without American volume, there's no going back. Why would Canada return to a trade framework where every election cycle brings new threats, new tariffs, new insults, and new uncertainties? Why tie itself to a partner that plays politics with fertilizer, energy, and industrial inputs? The truth is, the U.S. is not losing Canada to conflict. It's losing Canada to logic, and it doesn't even see it happening. This moment is a case study in how economic power really works. It's not about volume. It's not about noise. It's about leverage, infrastructure, supply chains, discipline. Canada has them. The U.S. under Trump does not. And when it mattered most, when potash became a pressure point, when farmers were looking for relief, when steel workers were demanding jobs, Trump didn't deliver. He blustered, he blamed, and he lost control of the board. Meanwhile, Canada played the long game and won. So here's the final truth that Trump and his MAGA loyalists won't say out loud. You can't bully your way into the future. You have to build it. And right now, Canada is doing just that, quietly, relentlessly, and without waiting for permission.